Hello and welcome to the Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. I'm your host, Macy Renee, and we are going on a journey together, my friend. If you've been looking for a podcast geared towards your growth, self-awareness, navigating your brain's daily mind drama, and deep inner work to become your highest and best self, you are in the perfect place. Let's get started. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Becoming Your Highest Self. I'm Macy Renee, and if you are new here, welcome. Thank you for being here. And if you are a returning listener, thank you again for being here and supporting my podcast. I really do appreciate it. So last episode, we talked about basically, are your thoughts sabotaging you? And we talked a lot about how the mind works and what that trickles into. So for instance, just a recap, you have circumstances in your life that creates thoughts in your mind, which create feelings in your body, which then cause you to either take action or not. And then as a result, you get your result. So I hope that episode resonated with you guys. But what I want to talk to you guys about today is the feelings part. Now, this past week on Friday, I attended a sound healing cacao ceremony with a really amazing coach and her partner. And I've worked with them in the past. I've hired her. I've done a coaching group of hers, and then I've done a retreat of hers. And I've done some other sound healing and cacao ceremonies of hers. She is an extremely beautiful, loving person. I will try to tag her and her partner in the show notes so that you can give them a follow. But basically, at different stages of my life, I've worked with different mentors and coaches. So I've had the business coach, I've had the life coach, I've had spiritual coach, I've had coaching geared towards money beliefs, I've had coaching geared towards healing childhood, I have had coaching geared towards really finding myself and, putting myself out there to figure out who I am and what I want to do in the world. And so I have done a lot of work on myself in 3 years with mentors and coaches, but in about 5 and 5.5 years in personal development using, podcasts and books and everything like that. So something that I've really learned is that we stuff a lot of our emotions in a vault in our body. That's kind of how I think of it. I kind of think of it as a vault or lockers. And every single thing that goes down in our life, when we don't really know how to process it because maybe we haven't learned the difference between responding from emotional adulthood versus emotional childhood, and that'll be another podcast. But when we really don't know the difference between the two, a lot of times we will store those emotions and hard feelings in our body without actually processing this. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but what I was guilty of doing a lot was having the mindset of, I just need to put on my big girl panties and handle it. So no matter how traumatic it was, no matter how big of a deal it was, I would basically normalize it in my mind and then tell myself that I just needed to put on my big girl panties and handle it because there was no time to feel my feelings or to feel my emotions. And I catch my clients doing this a lot. I catch friends doing this a lot. I catch people that I just know through acquaintances or even families that I work with as an occupational therapist doing this a lot, is basically saying, I don't have time to process what I'm feeling. I don't have time to sit here and cry about it because I can't change it. I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. And the problem with that mentality is if you're not processing those emotions, if you're not leaning into those feelings, they will bubble up later and they're going to come with force. So it's kind of like the buildup before a volcano. And this is where I think sometimes whenever we've had finally that like too much, where we end up having that explosion and we, burst on maybe a loved one that doesn't really deserve it, but we burst on them because we've been holding it. And then finally we're like, bah, and you just lose it. And so this was my life. A lot of, my childhood too was holding things in and holding things in. And like I said in that last episode, as a child, we process a lot of what we're hearing as fact. So we don't have the same ability to like reason and understand why we are processing something the way that we are, or why things are happening the way that we are. We just understand how we feel, and then we store that feeling in our body. So when something traumatic or difficult happens in our adulthood, when that feeling becomes familiar, it'll bring up old crap that we haven't dealt with. And that's really the bulk of what I do with my coaching clients, is digging up subconscious beliefs and patterns and saying like, okay, when did this happen? What have you made this mean? How is this thought serving you? Who are you when you believe that thought? But the purpose of this podcast today is really about teaching you about your feelings. Being able to feel your feelings and process them in a healthy way is super, super important. And one of the things that we do when we don't have that buildup of strong emotional intelligence is we will blame other people for how we are feeling. We will blame other people for what they are doing wrong, and we don't often take responsibility for how we are feeling or what we need to be doing to make things better for ourselves. So what happens when we blame someone else for what is going wrong in our life, like you might think that it's your spouse that's making you feel a certain way, your mother that's making you feel a certain way, your siblings, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, your friends, whoever it is. You may think that they are the reason you feel miserable, because maybe it really feels like, oh my God, they're ruining my life. They just, they keep doing all this stuff to me and it's not fair and I don't deserve this and all of that. The issue with that is giving your power away. It's literally taking all the power that you have to change it and putting it in their hands to fix it. And the issue with that is that most of the time, those people that are quote unquote responsible as you see it are not even thinking about how they're making you feel. So therefore you have now placed responsibility on them to fix it, and they can't fix it because they don't know how you feel. So I'm going to give you a very practical example of this. So what happens in our life, and I use this example a lot because it's the easiest, but let me back up for a second. It's really important to know that nobody, I'm going to repeat that again. Nobody is responsible for what you're feeling except for you. You are responsible for how you feel. And the reason that is because it's our thoughts that create the feelings in our body. So if someone says something mean to you, right, and you think it's really rude and you think that they're out of line and you're like, okay, that was really uncalled for and that made me feel like shiitake, that is not actually their responsibility or their fault. What happens is when they say that thing to you, you then have thoughts about it. You might have thoughts like that was rude. You might have thoughts of deep in your subconscious believing what they say. So if they look at you and they say something rude like you're a terrible mother, and you have always had thoughts of, am I doing enough? Am I a good mom? Am I making the right decisions for my child? And then somebody questions that in you or brings that up to you, all of a sudden you're going to have that knee-jerk reaction and want to blame them and lash out at them for being rude and saying things that are uncalled for, right? And you want to blame them and say, you're in the wrong, you did this, you made me feel this way, you called me, a bad mom, and that made me feel like trash, and blah, 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 blah. But actually what happened is they made a statement, and then your brain created thoughts around it or had subconscious thoughts around it, and that triggered the feeling in your body. So if you're already lost, go back and make sure you listen to Is Your Mind Sabotaging You, the last episode, because it's really important to understand the way that the mind works so that this work, as we get more and more complex in this podcast, doesn't completely throw you off. So I'm going to give you an example of this that I feel is silly but also practical, and this is what makes a lot of my clients, or it helps a lot of my clients understand this concept. So an example I always give is if someone came up to me, let's say it's like my husband, right, or my sister, someone that I really love and trust. If they came up to me and they said, Macy, I hate your big fat purple nose, and your Dumbo green ears. Let me just tell you that I would look at them sideways and really be confused. I would think that they were on something because I don't have a big fat purple nose and I don't have big green Dumbo ears. So if somebody came up to me and was legitimately saying that to me, I would not have any negative thoughts about it. I would be confused. I would be like, what are they smoking? Are they okay? Because that is not true. And, I know even if I looked in the mirror, I don't have a big fat purple nose and I don't have big green Dumbo ears. So what they said is literally just going to fly over me. It's not going to impact my life at all. I'm going to turn my head sideways and say, are you okay? Are you joking? Like, what are you talking about? And I'm probably going to laugh about it because it has no meaning in my life whatsoever. But if they came up to me and said something like, your podcast is trash and there's no way that anybody would ever want to listen to that. If I had thoughts in my mind that I was a bad podcaster, or that maybe I'm not good enough because I'm new and I'm doing everything on my own and I don't have the money to hire someone right now, and I am doing all the sound and the mixing on my own. If I had any negative thoughts about that, which earlier on I did, now I'm just like, you know what, I just need to get my message out in the world no matter what it looks like or sounds like. But if I had negative thoughts about that and my sister or my husband or someone I really loved and trusted, or even just a stranger said something like that to me, it's going to sit differently in my body if I have had thoughts about that. Is this making sense to you? So like big purple nose and large green Dumbo ears is going to fly over my head because I'm not having any subconscious thoughts or insecurities about having a big purple nose or big green Dumbo ears, because it's not true. I know in my subconscious and my conscious mind that for me is not true. That's not something that I believe. But if I do believe I'm not a good enough podcaster and that nobody wants to listen to my podcast, then yes, I'm going to have feelings of, you hurt my feelings. You made me sad. I can't believe that you would treat me this way. Why would you say that, right? And then what typically happens, and before I knew about personal development and life coaching, this is what I would do. I would then blame the other person for making me feel this way. Okay? You made me feel bad. You're rude. You said all of these negative things. Wrong. Let me just tell you that me doing that would give them all my power. And by giving them my power, now they are in charge of fixing my feelings. If you can really let this sink in, I'm going to tell you, like, this is going to make you feel out of control, because if you hand them all the power to fix your feelings, that means you never have control of your feelings. That means you are operating with everything external. And you can't control everything that's happening in an external world. Okay, you can only control what's happening in your internal body, your mind, your emotional space, your energetic space. That's what you have to control. So if you're feeling bad and then you tell someone, you made me feel this way, you are then handing them your emotional power and saying, fix it. And they don't understand how you feel because they don't live in your body. Okay? Like, if they had any inkling of how you actually feel, and I know that we have compassion and sympathy and all of that, but if they actually could understand how you feel, it would mean that they physically would have to jump out of their body and jump into yours. They have no control of how you're feeling. You control how you're feeling because you have your own thoughts. And when you can take responsibility for how you're feeling, your life will change because you have the power to change it. So like when someone says something and it triggers me, whether it's a Facebook post or they say something to me, or I'm in the midst of a conversation and I hear something that gives me like a knee-jerk reaction, what I do now in my current life is really ask myself, why did that just trigger me? Why did that just bother me? And the reason being is because I'm trying to search my subconscious for what I've obviously stored away in my locker, in my vault, because I'm now having thoughts about something that they said, and I might have that knee-jerk reaction to want to blame them for making me feel a certain way, but actually it's something in my subconscious that's making me feel that way. So I really have to ask myself and get clear on, like, okay, what in my subconscious is causing this? Like, this is really important. Now, here's the thing. This can show up in numerous ways. Guys, this still shows up for me all the time. Sometimes something will completely trigger me and I will have a strong emotional response, and I will know in my conscious mind, like logically, that it should not bother me. It's very minuscule. It's very silly, right, to feel upset about it. But if I sit with myself long enough and really lean into my feelings and I don't allow myself to buffer, go to the buffering episode if you didn't listen to that one. If I don't allow myself to buffer, then I can usually pinpoint the subconscious thought. And here's what's interesting. Most of my subconscious thoughts come from childhood. However, I perceive something in my 5-year-old body, my 7-year-old body, my 12-year-old body, before I had the ability to really understand the decisions that were happening around me outside of me. And so however I felt as a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 12-year-old, I then processed the world from that standpoint. I stored the feeling in my body. I grew up as an adult. Something external will trigger me. And then all of a sudden, I'm having an emotional childhood response where my body is responding the way that it did when I was 7 and something happened, or 12 and something happened, and I didn't know how to process it then. So if you're not aware of like emotional intelligence and having a strong responsibility for how you're feeling and what's happening in your life and what's happening internally versus externally, it can be very easy to place blame and responsibility on other people for how you're feeling. And it's the most powerless thing that you can do. So the advice that I would give you, one, is to really turn inward and ask yourself what triggered you when someone said something to you. So today, if your husband comes home and he says something that makes you want to pop off and you want to like scream because he doesn't get it, I'm quoting, he doesn't get it. Why do you feel so upset? What thoughts are you having that are making you so upset? And remember that he can't physically jump in your body and understand how you're feeling, so he can't actually fix it. Same as reverse. If this is your wife, right? If you're a guy listening to this and she says something crazy, and you're like, ugh, and you just want to get in an argument, take responsibility for how you're feeling. Ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Now, another thing that I want to talk about too is leaning into your feelings. Don't run away from them. I went to this healing retreat, and what it's all about is really surrendering to leaning in and feeling your feelings. And I make myself go to these events whenever she does them because sometimes my mind understands what needs to be done, but I'm not allowing my body to actually process the emotions. And that's what's really important, is you can logically know, okay, I want to be positive. Let me think a positive thought. Let me change my thought from negative to positive. But if you're not leaning in and being authentic in expressing your feelings and your emotion and just surrendering to all of that, you're not actually healing the deep subconscious patterns that have been stored there. So I really like going to these healing retreats and, sound ceremonies. And I know that they offer these in all kinds of different states. And, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I can help connect you. I'm sure that my coach that does this can help connect you. And then you might even be able to meet her and her fiance. But it's very powerful stuff. And what I love about it is that when I'm in that space, they facilitate the safe space for me to lean in and surrender to my anxiety and surrender to all of these subconscious thoughts that I'm having and let out whatever emotion needs to come out. Something that I hear clients say a lot, especially when I was traveling and doing Reiki energy healing, because I'm a Reiki master teacher, my clients would constantly say, like, I don't have time to cry, I don't have time to feel my feelings, or I don't ever cry. And I would be like, that's not normal. You need to cry, okay? It's normal to express emotion. So what thoughts are you having that keep you from expressing your emotion? And having a thought like, I don't have time to break down, or I don't want my kids to see me break down, or, I have to be the strong one, or I have to pull up my big girl panties and handle business, kind of like I used to do, is actually not serving you. Your vault is probably very, very full. And on a little bit more of a deep spiritual level, you're blocking yourself energetically from good things to continue coming in and to continue putting good things out. And it will affect your health. I see this all the time. Like with my clients doing energy work, it would be affecting their physical health. Not because they actually had, these ailments beforehand, but because energetically they are creating it and manifesting it because they're not processing what is going on in their subconscious. But that could be another podcast too. So leaning into your feelings means that when you start to feel angry, sad, anxiety, you start to feel those feelings bubbling up. Most of the time what we want to do is buffer. We want to grab our phone and scroll. We want to go have the drink of alcohol. We want to go smoke. We want to go watch 8 hours of Netflix. We want to do something else other than be in our body because we are so uncomfortable sitting with that emotion. But the power and the breakthrough is in sitting with that emotion. Like who you become on the other side of feeling your feelings is incredible. Like I would not be here even talking to you guys on this podcast if I had not leaned in and really processed my emotions and my feelings, and if I hadn't ever learned how to take responsibility for my feelings. And I still use this work all the time. So this work has been super powerful for me. Like 2 years ago, I was getting coached on how to emotionally move through things that I experienced in childhood and not understanding how to process my emotions. So vulnerability moment, like one of the things that I experienced in my childhood was just knowing my story at a very young age. And a part of my story came from my mom's experience in getting pregnant with me. She was very young. She was a teen mom that got pregnant with me at 15 unexpectedly through a story in itself. And when that happened, my grandparents did not feel she was at all ready to handle being a mom. They also didn't like what had happened and how it had gone down. And so they felt in 1991 that the best option for my mom was to have a medical abortion. And although my mom did not want that at all, that was the decision that they made as her parents. And so my mom had a medical abortion, which is a series of 2 pills that kills the fetus. And for some reason, God, I don't know, I lived through that. I did not die. There is a 98% success rate with that medical abortion. And if 100 women were to take that pill today, only 2 fetuses would make it out alive. And I was one of them. And I truly believe that it is because I have been sent here to find my purpose and to help women in a deep and powerful way. And my God, have I fought like hell to be here for you guys today, like to give you this podcast, to give you this content, to open my heart. And hindsight is 2020. So looking back, I'm like, my God, everything has happened for me in the most beautiful way. And as painful as things have been for me, and as hard as it has been to be vulnerable and to lean into my feelings and to heal those negative thoughts that I used to have and the blame and responsibility I used to place on so many people, I'm learning that all of it has served me to get to this point today so that you can hear this message. And I'm a nervous wreck in sharing that, but that's what happened. And so my mom had a lot of trauma around that, of having, the emotional, I think, just the emotional burden of like, I had an abortion and it didn't work, and for her, she was like, obviously, thank God. And, even the risk of whenever she was able to carry me to term, one of the biggest risks with having a baby after having the abortion was intellectual disabilities, missing digits, fingers and toes, deformities. And I remember my mom telling me like, that she prayed that I would come out happy and healthy and that nothing was going to be wrong. But the whole point of that is in those series of decisions, right, that went down. When I was born, my mom had emotional trauma from that. My grandparents had emotional trauma of their own. There's so much more to the story and the chapters in my book, and how I processed things as a child, how like things that I heard growing up as a child. And to be completely honest, that has been a lot of the rewiring work that I have had to do, a lot of the healing work that I've had to do the last my entire life. And, for me, I went to therapy my entire life talking through all of this and how I was processing it and how I was perceiving it and how I felt responsible a lot of the times. I felt responsible for any fights that my mom and my grandma got in. I always felt like the responsible one or like the burden, like I maybe was a mistake. And, it's so heavy, but when I found life coaching, she was the first person, Stacey Boehman, I will just shout her out, was the first person that really taught me my responsibility in all of it, because I truly was operating in a victim mentality of like, why me, poor me, my story, how am I ever going to overcome this? I'm so angry, I'm so sad, I have so much I've, dealt with since I was a kid, and so much I've heard, so much I've seen, so much responsibility I've taken on. And, because that's not all of my story. Like I could write a book. And she was the first person that just looked me in the eyes, basically on Zoom in a coaching call and in person at a retreat, and said, you're responsible for how you're feeling and what you're thinking about these things. And until you learn to take responsibility for how you're feeling and the way that you're thinking about the things that have happened in your past, this will never change. And guys, I was sick of feeling like a victim. I was sick of things not changing. I didn't want to live the same day that I was living with the same feelings I was feeling every single day for the rest of my life. It was so powerless. And I didn't want that for myself. I have a big vision for my life. I can visualize and dream so big. I see it. I feel it in my bones. I know that I have been brought here with a God-given purpose that is evidenced by being a little baby that was able to somehow miraculously survive an abortion. And because of that, I take it very seriously. I take this work very seriously. It makes me want to cry even being on this podcast because I take it seriously. I take my clients coming to me so seriously. My desire to help people take their power back is so important to me. If you have a story, if you have pain, if you have hardship, if you have things that just do not feel fair, if you have people you've been blaming and people you've been angry at and feeling like your life is not what it could have been because of your past and your story, I'm here to tell you that everything can be different for you if you are tired of feeling the way that you feel now. And it takes stepping up to the plate, taking responsibility for how you feel and the results that you want to have in your life, and finding the help to get there. So it doesn't have to be a coach. If you get that from a therapist, if you get it from a book, if you get it from podcasts, if you do get it from a coach, whatever. But if you want it to change, you have to be willing to do the work. And the work is leaning in and feeling your feelings. My entire life has been spent with anxiety that where psychiatrists, doctors wanted to medicate me to make me, quote unquote, feel better. And yes, maybe it would have subsided a lot of the anxious symptoms, but it wouldn't have gotten to the root of what is actually happening. And what the root cause of what has happened in my life is the way that I've processed everything that has gone down from what I can remember in my childhood, everything that I was told, all of those beliefs, all of those stories, the trauma of other family members and what they were battling, and the responsibility that I put on myself for maybe making them feel that way because things didn't work out maybe the way that they wanted things to work out, and I carried on that burden for so long, an anxious kiddo with such separation anxiety, such trauma. And on the outside looking in, nobody would have ever known it. Everybody would have thought happy-go-lucky, positive always, wonderful upbringing, no drama, happy, healthy, all the things. And that's the thing. You don't know what people are going through behind closed doors. You don't know how they're processing things. You don't know what they're going through. So 1, please be kind. That's kind of like a side note. But 2, compassion and understanding. And 3, ask for help and lean into those feelings. My whole point in saying this was that my entire life, even though I was getting the help, right, I also felt like I was running from myself. I was buffering and I was never getting anywhere. And part of the reason was because I never knew I needed to lean in and feel my feelings. I thought I needed to pull up my big girl panties and handle every situation and be the strong one and, put on a brave face and smile on social media like everything was always going well. And what I've learned over the last few years is leaning in, feeling my feelings, questioning, like, why is this anxiety here? It's here to teach me something. These subconscious thoughts and patterns are here trying to teach me something. And every time that I can lean into them and just feel it and surrender to it, I get stronger on the other side. And every single time I do that, I learn about a new piece of myself. I integrate that piece into myself. And when I do that, sure enough, I am sent a client that has been going through the same thing and they have no idea how they're ever going to get through it. And at that point, I know how to help them because I'm like, hey, I've done this work. I get it. I understand. But feel your feelings. It is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself. And when you start to feel that emotion bubble up, sit with yourself. Don't run from it. Don't buffer it. Why is it there? Say, why are you here? And just sit with it. And if you can do that long enough, I promise you, you will be flooded with so many, at first, conscious thoughts, surface level thoughts. What do I need to make my daughter for lunch tomorrow? What am I going to eat for tomorrow? What do I need to get at the grocery? Oh my gosh, I need to go get my oil changed. At first, it'll be those conscious patterns. And if you can continue to lean into maybe why you're feeling bad, all of a sudden, those subconscious thoughts will just start coming boom, 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 boom. And that's usually when we run away. We're like, oh no, don't want to feel this, don't have time, can't, I feel like I'm going to cry. I don't want the kids to see me cry. I've got to go pick them up in carpool line. Nope, don't have time for this. Honor your feelings. Make time for it. Feel it. If you need to cry, cry in that moment. Stop telling yourself you have to be Superwoman or Superman. You have a right to feel and you deserve to feel, and your body's asking you to feel. And when you hold in that energy for a long time, it will start to make you ill. You will physically start to feel ill, okay? You will be creating and manifesting things in your body that you don't want because you're not willing to lean in and search for what is actually happening. And if you feel like you can't do it alone, seek a therapist, seek a counselor, seek a psychiatrist, get a coach, do all of it if that's what helps you. But lean in and honor what you're feeling. Your feelings teach you. Your feelings are there for a purpose. Your feelings are helping you get to your highest self if you can honor them, surrender, and lean in. And the reason that I still work with coaches on this is because my brain still tells me it's not safe. And my brain doesn't want to feel bad. I told you this. It doesn't want you to feel bad. So I have to consciously make decisions to lean in and go to people who can help me do that. And even this past Friday when I went, Nicole said, I could feel anger coming from you. And she said, did you have any of that? And I was like, oh yeah. I felt anger energy, and it came from, again, childhood stuff that I thought I had healed. And so it's always teaching me what I need to do next. Honor your feelings, guys. Take your power back. Stop blaming others for how you feel. Lean in, surrender, and I'll see you guys next episode. Oh, and big important thing, if you don't like what someone is saying to you, remember, you're responsible for how you feel, but you are also in charge of setting boundaries. So if you missed that episode, make sure to go back and listen to that. See you next time.